to get us started.
Great, thanks, Debbie. Well, welcome everyone to our monthly Ampath virtual fireside chat. Thank you for tuning in online with us. I'm here from in Indianapolis, but I know many of you are in Eldoret, and actually all of our guests are in Eldoret this evening. But thank you for joining in from wherever you are around the world. So I'm Adrian Gardner, the Executive Director of the Ampath Consortium and Director of the IU Center for Global Health, again in Indianapolis, Indiana. In Eldoret at the IU House, we've had these weekly fireside chats since really the 1990s to provide a space to learn and reflect with our trainees and visitors. And we're hopeful as we see the COVID numbers in Kenya sort of at a lull right now that we'll be able to get more and more trainees back. We actually have our first residents, well, besides our long-term faculty and residents, we have our short-term residents there this month from neurology. So we're excited that they're there. But we've been able to at least rely on technology to continue to support these discussions virtually, and it's allowed us to sort of continue to have these reflections. So, as many of you know, our Ampath partnership between Moi University, Moi Teaching and Referral Hospital, IU, and the other consortium institutions spans a large number of clinical and non-clinical disciplines. And today's panelists are all joining us from Kenya, as I mentioned, and really looking forward to this conversation about Ampath surgery. So, to get us started today, I'm happy to introduce Dr. David Matthews, who is well known to many of you. He is a clinical associate professor of medicine at Indiana University School of Medicine. And Dr. Matthews was the surgery leader for our program from Indiana University at Eldoret from, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Dave, but 1996 to 2001, is that right? And has returned on really countless occasions to continue to work closely with Kenyan colleagues and friends and move forward the surgery program. So after Dr. Matthews and Professor Otsula's conversation, we will have time to answer some questions. So please put your comments and questions in the chat as we go along. And without further ado, I'll turn it over to you, Dave.
I hope you can hear me. Can you hear me now?
You're good.
Great. Let me know if there's any issues, but we're set up here. So we'd like to welcome you to a fireside chat for Ampath surgery. The title of our talk today is Lessons from the Past and Plans for the Future. Yeah, go ahead and show the first slide, I think. Hopefully you'll see my title slide in here in just a second. I have one of the top experts in IT here. Does it look like my title slide?
We got it, Dave.
Great. So again, welcome to a fireside chat for Ampath surgery. Although much of our audience is virtual, your panelists are coming to you from House 1 at the IU House, which is actually very appropriate given the nature of the talk. See, this is where we used to have the real in-person fireside chats. And you just hear dogs barking in the background, so that will help the atmosphere. Let me start by giving you a little bit of a glimpse of where we're taking you on this fireside chat. The main thing we want to share with you is the story of two great surgery leaders. One is Kenyan, one is American. We're both heading for impending retirement from their leadership positions within the next year. I believe you're going to find great value as we highlight some of their experiences and lessons from the segment of their careers that has been involved with Ampath and global surgery. At least two important issues I think you're going to find is, as we develop the talk, is the importance to Ampath surgery of individual decisions that people have made, decisions that maybe could have gone one way or the other for their career. And it's probably something for, I know there will be some younger people on this talk, and so something for the people to consider when they get to a branching point, as we all do at various times. But the second point of emphasis beyond just career decisions and maybe how to make them is the strong leadership skills that we've seen. I guess I've learned in my career in surgery that some of us are good at some things and some are good at other things. And a lot of surgeons are good clinicians. Some of us are too good teachers, researchers. We sometimes find exceptional, strong leaders. And the two people whose pictures you see on the screen, Dr. Braza Utsula and Dr. Gary Dunnington, are probably the best examples I've ever known of that type of skill. And so what we see with them is they're not just administrators, but when presented with difficult problems, they somehow found the vision and determination to find disruptive solutions to the problems. And this is really, as many of you will know and have seen, has made a better future for so many because of those leadership skills. So I can guarantee you'll find this talk inspirational. I think if you're a young person and you're still planning your career, you'll definitely be inspired. Some of us are a little bit older, but I want you to remember Joe and Sarah Ellen Mamlin came here as Joe retired and started the Empath program, and we've seen the effects of 20 years of that. And so I guess you're never too old to start out and make some changes even in your career path.
Hey, Dave, can I just jump in and put a plug in that today is Joe's birthday? So happy birthday, Joe.
Oh, that's great, Joe. Amazing. So I think you'll see from this talk that Ampath is not really so much about the organization. We often say Ampath this, Ampath that. Ampath for me is all about individuals. Joe Mamlin told me, he said, it's going to be about you and the person you find as to have a relationship with academically on the Kenyan side, and that was the man I'm sitting next to. And so to me, when I think of Ampath, I don't think of an organization, I think about individuals. And so you'll see a little bit more about these two individuals who committed themselves to the Ampath mission and have worked together to make our lives better. So the next slide. So at the beginning of this, there's going to be quite a focus on Professor Utsula's history, just some of his background that some of you may know, others may not. So this is actually a picture of his father, who was one of the first physicians, African physicians in East Africa, even in colonial days. This is a picture of him treating a patient, a Maasai patient, where he had been posted. And I wonder, just to ask Professor Utsula to tell us maybe some stories of his memories of his father and those times, how his father was able to be trained as one of the first, African doctors in a colonial era to go for training, where he went for his training, and maybe just some stories about that for a few minutes.
Yeah, thank you, David. My father was born in the western part of the country, was the oldest child in the family of a large number of people. But who went to school as a small boy because my grandfather was one of the few people who converted to Christianity at the very beginning. And he actually learned how to read the little there was in vernacular, in our own language. That's how he went to school. Going to school was a little bit of a challenge because the school was far from home. He had to live with relatives, and later on, he went to a boarding school where he had to walk about 40 kilometers. It took 2 or 3 days to get to school and 2 to 3 days to get home when school closed. But he did well and went to some of the famous schools then, which are still famous. He went to Alliance High School, which is probably still one of the big schools in this country, and from there he went to Makerere University in Kampala in Uganda, where he studied medicine. After that, he came and worked. He graduated, I believe, in 1948. And he came and worked for many years. But in 1960, he went to University of London and did a diploma in tropical medicine and hygiene. And in 1961, he went to Toronto University and did diploma or an MPH, today's MPH. So that was his main areas. Later on, he was in administration, the colonial times. It was a fairly senior position, but he graduated on to become the director of leprosy research in East Africa. And he worked there until he retired. After he retired, he worked in other hospitals a little bit, just to occupy his time. That's the
Well,
background.
and I know there were times when the places he was posted, I think you told me you were together with him. What influence do you think his being a physician had on you and being a physician?
He was very liberal. He didn't insist. And in fact, if I may say something else, he sent us to ordinary schools. And in the morning, he would not give us a lift to go to school. You had to walk with your friends to go to school. But I remember as I was deciding on this, he said, look, if he was born again, he would be a doctor. But if I wanted to be a rich person, I should do economics. But my mother called me and said, you are going to be a doctor, you hear me? And since we were good children in those days, I agreed to go to medical school. But anyway, I liked his work, and the way people looked at him was also a nice thing. And if you went to a place and said your name was Otila, they immediately asked you if you're Dr. Otila's son. Yeah, so all this played into me becoming a doctor.
That situation of being asked if you're Dr. Otsula's child continues to this day, because tell us about the other family members in the meantime who have become physicians.
Yeah, well, for me that continues, but people don't refer too much to this because people who call me Otila's son are the older ones. And now that I'm the older one, I can't call myself. But yes, one of my sisters is a doctor, and two of my children are doctors. Okay.
So let's go with the next slide. This is just a slide. It's kind of busy, but it shows you the basic timeline of his career. So maybe a lot of people didn't know about all of this, but I'm going to stop at certain places on this and ask him, some of the stories about it. So when his father went to medical school in Uganda, there was no University of Nairobi in Nairobi for medicine. So I believe it started around 1960.
No, you see, the Kampala, Makerere University, then became part of the University of East Africa with Makerere, Dar es Salaam, and Nairobi. And that continued until 1970. In fact, when I went to university, we registered at the University of East Africa, but we immediately became University of Nairobi, so it changed.
So you were among the early graduates from the University of Nairobi.
Yes, very good.
And then on graduation, you entered in a master's in medicine program in surgery. So your father having been a different kind of career, how was it that you chose surgery for yours?
Two things happened. I finished medical school. I did internship, and with the system that we have here, I became a medical officer. I went to work in a smaller hospital for a year. At that point, my father thought I should become a psychiatrist because his brother was a psychiatrist. He's probably the first Kenyan-born psychiatrist. And he wanted me to be a psychiatrist, but I couldn't cope with neurotics. So I changed my mind and decided, having looked around also, decided to do surgery. At that time, I was not thinking cardiothoracic. I was thinking about surgery. And in fact, at that time, as I went into surgery, I was thinking probably neurosurgery. So I did go to cardiothoracic, to general surgery at the University of Nairobi, and I did 3 years of general surgery, at the end of which I decided I'd be a cardiothoracic surgeon. And the main reason not to say anything bad about my colleagues is that I couldn't bear the results of neurosurgical operations. So then I chose this one instead. But later on, at least my father liked it, and he enjoyed me doing cardiac surgery in particular, because he said an interesting thing. He said, and I haven't checked, but he told me that the first time anybody did catheterization He's supposed to have been a medical student who did that in 1948. And at that time, he had just graduated. And now that this has become real, he liked the idea that I was in that field.
How was it that in 1981 you left Nairobi and ended up in Birmingham, England, for your cardiothoracic fellowship?
Yeah, the thing is, we were not being trained here. I went to the unit. I actually spent the unit before I went to England, in 1980-81, working there to familiarize myself as a preparation to go and train. And at that time, most people trained in England. So I did get a government sponsorship to go to Birmingham and train.
Now, after your training there, which must have been very different, but I probably want to focus on, you came then back to Nairobi. You practiced as a cardiothoracic surgeon for several years. And then there was a moment in 1991 where you left Nairobi to come to Eldoret. Can you tell us a little bit about that decision, how it was made?
Yeah. Yes. First of all, when I got back from England, we came back to Nairobi, cardiac surgery had stalled. So our first exercise in 1985 was to restart the program, which we did. In fact, I did the first case in that series. So the program started. And I continued working there. However, several things happened. This program was a bit, particularly the surgical side, was not so smooth. And sometimes we have to go and fight with administration to get materials and things like that, and I was getting tired. So in 1988, I was thinking about coming to Eldoret. I didn't get, I wasn't invited for the interview, I suppose. I wasn't shortlisted at that point. So I continued in Nairobi. But in 1990 then, I had an invitation from the university asking if I'm still interested in coming to Eldoret. Now, what had happened earlier in 1990s that my father had died and had left me with a large family and an estate to look after on this side. So it was convenient to come to Eldoret. I don't think at that particular time, I was thinking of getting so involved in the management of the education system in this new medical school. And also, there were a lot of people who didn't think that a person of my training should come to Eldoret where there was literally nothing. But I said, okay, we will not do cardiac surgery there, but we will do thoracic surgery. And in my view, what I needed was an anesthetist and a good physiotherapist. With those two, we could do thoracic surgery. And that's how I came to Eldoret.
Can you give the next slide? So many of us who are older will remember this building, which still exists. But when I arrived, and I'm sure because I came after you, this was the main administrative building for all of Moi University Faculty of Health Sciences, where dozens and maybe 100, I don't know, faculty by the time I arrived. There weren't so many in the early days, but by the time I came, there were more. So basically there were, I don't know how many desks in that building. And you just went to find an unoccupied desk, and that was your office for a while. And that you might go away and then come back and get a different one.
That's true. This building, at the time you came here, I think we were about 60. And we all used this building. There was a second building, actually, another building like this up the road, which we used to use also. But like you sat in shifts, or sometimes, or you went to the hospital and worked in the hospital and just came here if there were meetings or things like that. But yes, this was the only structure at that time.
I should know the founding date of Moi University Faculty of Health Sciences. I don't know if it was 1988 or.
Professor Mengage was appointed here in 1988 to set up the new school. But the first admission, I think, was in 1990.
And so you arrived in 1991. The school was barely 2-3 years old.
Yes.
Very good. How big was the surgery department when you arrived? You arrived as the head. of the department?
Yes, there were three of us. There was an ENT surgeon, another general surgeon. The other thing that was interesting at that point, the Department of Human Anatomy didn't exist. So the Department of Surgery took the responsibility of running all the teaching in the Department of Anatomy. So technically I was in charge of surgery and anatomy, but I had my colleague to head the anatomy bit in terms of organization and what students do and things like that, yes. In fact, at that time, we had got Nairobi to get a cadaver, a few cadavers, because they didn't have any. Fortunately, the head of the department there was one of my students. And even though other people were objecting, he just told me, see, we sat there and talked. Then after they went, he gave me a cadaver and we put in the vehicle and came to Eldoret. The police didn't stop us. I don't know exactly why.
Ralph, how did you go about expanding the faculty in your department from only 3 at the beginning? And what strategies did you use and how hard was it to recruit?
You see, the profession was against a new school. And the law under which the medical schools are registered was made at that time in such a way that the gold standard was University of Nairobi. So University of Nairobi didn't approve of us. And therefore really we were in the medical school. So to get people was difficult, but I went there and talked to a lot of people who were finishing training or doing things like that. And we interviewed a lot of people, but probably just 10% of the people we interviewed ended up coming. Yeah. We built a department, of human anatomy. With human anatomy, what I did is to go to University of Nairobi and say, can you tell me people who did Bachelor of Science in human anatomy? Because there are people who are doing medicine, stopping, do the Bachelor of Science first, then come back to finish. They gave me this list. So when they gave me this list, I went to the Ministry of Health and told them, see, there are these people. I talked to people there nicely. There are these people, I like them posted to Eldoret. So they didn't know how, but they just found themselves posted to Eldoret. And then I went to university and said, I wanted these people given the interns. Yeah, they're just new graduates from medical school. I want them given position of lecturer in the Department of Human Anatomy. And there's a big fight. Yeah, it was a real big fight. But somebody listened. And they were, first of all, given a part-time appointment. And as soon as they finished, they were given appointment, a formal appointment. So they joined the university. But basically, we created the department and created a lot of stuff in the school at that time by going and talking to different people and persuading them that this is tenable, that this is a good thing. And yes.
When you came, and even later when I came, a few years later, the general surgeons pretty much did everything. And you were considered a cardiac surgeon who also fully did general surgery, I believe.
Yeah.
So, but during your tenure as the head of department, you started looking towards specialization. So taking these general surgeons and making specialists of them. Can you tell us a little bit about what strategy you used and the effect?
Yeah, just let me go back a little bit. In fact, David is one of the people I have to say, to find. And what happened is Joe Mamlin, talking to him about very many things we had, he said he could identify a surgeon to come and give us support. I think when you arrived here, there were just 4 of us, the 3 of us also.
Yes.
Yeah. And he came to join us. So he was one of the early members of our department in this school. Had been for over 10 years, I've been in cardiac surgery. I had not done any, I had not been working in general surgery, but really, general surgery here was very thin and there was a big workload. And I wasn't doing a lot of cardiac surgery at that time. So I also joined in and we just did that. But in the early 90s, we drew a plan. And we were very ambitious then. We say that by 1996, we will have specialties You know, we will have cardiothoracic hours here. We'll have neurosurgery. We'll have orthopedics. We will have ophthalmology, and the rest of them. We didn't succeed, but we started working on them. Now, in some of the specialties, we had a problem because the students now came to a stage where they were supposed to be learning orthopedics, and we didn't have an orthopedic surgeon here. And the university was insisting that they were aware that in my general surgical training, I had done a certain amount of orthopedics, which should be enough to teach the undergraduates, which I refused to accept. And at that time, I said, let the students graduate without that course, if you will allow them. So what then happened at that point is that they asked me, I was called to a meeting and asked, what do we do? And I said, what do we do? We take the students to University of Nairobi for the rotations in orthopedics, which were 4 weeks each, and anesthesia, those two, even though we had an anesthetist here. We agreed with him that we would take the students there for that purpose. So I then went to Nairobi and found the head of department, or the chairman of the department of orthopedics, who was a year behind me in school. I said, this is what I want you to do. And they said, you see, you should have written to me because I would have written to you and said, But now that you are here, we will do that for 2 years. So then at that point, it meant that we had to train somebody. So we came, and as we were doing that, and I used to go with students. In fact, at one point, I was sharing a room with now Dr. Musao, when he was a student, because I had to take them there, stay with them. Then I recruited one of the younger surgeons who had finished training and had actually left government and gone to private practice, but I brought him to the department. And I sent him and the other surgeon that was in the department to South Africa to train him in orthopedics and the other one in neurology. So that was really, in surgery, that was the beginning of specialization.
Today we have so many orthopedic surgeons, we have urologists, we have neurosurgeons.
Yes.
But you know, when I worked here with you, we were all of those people.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Next slide. So I'm hoping that people will really find this a funny slide. I think it's the best slide on the whole deck. So this was 25 years ago when I arrived to work with Professor Otsula. One of us looks a lot older, and I don't know if he found a fountain of youth here, but I'm going to ask him later. I came here in 1990, visited in 1995, started working here in 1996. Next slide. So I had the great fortune of coming here for a site visit with these two people who really need no introduction, Bob Eingers and Joe and Sarah Alamamon. And I was just telling people tonight, what a treat to come here to visit this site for the first time with those two. And they can talk you into anything. And I didn't need to be talked into it because I met a great leader, but it was good fortune for me. And then the next slide. So really the first project that Professor Otsula gave to me, we were working in this single room theater. When I say we, all surgeons, that included general surgeons and gynecologists and everybody. So the first time I visited with Professor, he said, let's do some cases, you can see how the theater works. So several days in a row, we went to theater and we never did any cases, in spite of the fact that he would turn a list in, because one day I think there was no oxygen and another day maybe no gloves or no gauze or something. And somehow I didn't get discouraged, and because of him, I think, and Joe and Bob. So he first came to me with the project of building more theaters because we had talented surgeons. They were increasing every year. We had numerous medical students and other trainees that didn't get to see anything other than C-sections all day. So the next slide. Prof, we started a project, you and I, that here's a picture or two, just of building the operating rooms that are now the main operating rooms here. Do you mind just telling us what your strategy was, how you dealt initially with not having really an operating room, and then how you set about putting this in motion?
operating room was a problem, and we'd all be competing for this space. But if there was a maternity case, the nurses won't give you theater. Full stop. Doesn't matter what you say to them. This had to be done. Sometimes we had to operate in the corridors if you had to still operate, or come in the middle of the night when there's nobody. So it was obvious. But this project came about in a way, there are two ways looking at it. It came about because of David, but it also came about accidentally. Because David had been here, and he belonged to the Second Presbyterian Church.
Yes.
And you must have talked to them about coming here and all that. He was going to come. And there was somebody who belonged to that church who was in Nairobi for whatever reason he was there, decided to come to Eldoret and see this place. I've never made up my mind, David, whether he was checking you out or or he was just interested. But he came and he didn't find me, but he left me a note. He talked to people who were there. They told him about orthopedics and all that. He was an orthopedic surgeon. He chaired the Orthopedic Overseas Organization. That he could help with teaching orthopedics. So I came to Indiana House, not this one, there used to be another one there. And as the doctor was there, was a physician, I can't remember his name now, whether he knows this name. He's never heard of the name. But anyway, he found out for me who it was. We found out it was a retired orthopedic surgeon. We also found out that he was a very wealthy person. So I went back to my office and I wrote him a letter and said, yes, we'd like to work with you, and we like the idea that you can send some surgeons, some orthopedic surgeons, to come and teach the students. The only thing is they will not be able to operate while they're here because we don't have operating space. So that discussion went on like that. But then he came, and I think next time he came, you had come.
Yes.
And we talked with him. We had a meeting, we talked with him and all that. And he said he had indicated that if we gave him a house, and in fact, in my mind, I was going to give him a house. There's a house called Matthew's house.
Yeah.
I was going to give him that house to live in. And he said, I'll give you this amount of money at that time, 2 million shillings, which would build that house those days. He said, take this money and increase the operating space. Okay. It was a bit of a challenge at that point because the university was claiming the money, or thought they had the right to the money because I was talking that person as the chairman of the Department of Surgery. And the hospital also had the right to the money because the land was theirs. But anyway, we negotiated that, and we made these plans. We were working with the Professor Obani, who was a anesthetist, who's not here, and Mr. Minor. Mr. Minor is an architect, even now here in Eldoret, and I have a lot of respect for him because he did this work and he didn't ask me to pay him. He just showed him what to do. We had to go to some theater so that he has a clear idea of what to draw, and he drew this nice plan, and we sent it to George Raff and said, this is what we want to build, but we only want to build this space here, just theater B, and that space outside there, and the rest will be built when we find the money. And in his reply, he said, just do the whole foundation. And then he sent, again, I don't remember his name, but there was an architect from Indianapolis,
Steve Sturts,
who came here to put this building on the ground. Then he was followed for a short while by an engineer, by a chemical engineer in this case. Just before, I don't know how that sequence came in that way because because you followed them then.
I did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when David got here, to avoid the politics of the money, I gave the account to him and made him the only signatory. In fact, I appointed him the contractor to build this building, and he did all the purchasing. Yeah, he had this truck, and he did all the purchasing. He went to see which was cheapest where. And I came and did this, and he didn't have to go out to look for bids, who is cheapest or anything, but he just went to the shops and did this is the cheapest you buy from here. And he didn't. There was no process. Yeah. And we were able to do this building for the amount of money which nobody believed at that time. In fact, I think we spent 17 million shillings, I think, in Kenya shillings. Yes.
I, of course, knew nothing about construction, and we had built these large trusses, and so they were so heavy. They're made of these very heavy steel.
Yeah.
And so I asked you how we were going to get them up on top of the building, and where was the crane? And people said we won't be using a crane. And so I was so scared the day that they used ropes and manpower to pull these up on top. I was pretty sure people were going to be hurt, and nobody was. And we ended up with this building, and in this picture you can see in the foreground the old theater, which is sort of in white, if you will, with a few windows up high on the second floor. That is actually the site of the current ICU. It was later renovated. And the new theater is in the background with a red roof. And then the Sociani Red roof, most of you know below. So this it expanded operating rooms by 4 and later became 6 operating rooms. So we went from 1 to 6, and in retrospect, it was not enough, but it's so better. And I many times, I know you feel the same way, when I'm not in Eldoret or when I'm not doing surgeries myself, I can't even count the number of medical students, nurses, and patients who have all benefited greatly from that, including the professional satisfaction of the surgeons to actually be able to go to the theater and not have their cases canceled because of cesareans. So anyway, I think that was perhaps one of your greatest accomplishments.
Yes, but I'd like to tell you a different story. You see, we didn't have any monitors. Okay, so we used to do this is how the medical students keep the hand on the pulse as we operate, and hope that they will know when it changes. At least until you open the chest. When you open the chest, it's okay, you can see it. You know what do you do? Yes, and we did that. And the other one, for elective cases, Professor Ambani designed this system and said, you see, we're going to do a lung resection, we must do some lung function tests, and there were none. Yeah. So he said, what do you do? And I don't know where he got it from, but he told me, and he used to do it. We put a candle 1 meter, and if he's able to blow, he will breathe post-operative. And it worked.
Prof, I'm going to move us up forward in time now. After serving as the head of the surgery department, no, we'll stay there. Head of the surgery department for 6 years?
Yes, 7.
And then in 1999, you then became the dean of the medical school, and you served there for 6 years.
Yes.
So can you tell us a little bit about that transition from head of a department of surgery to becoming the dean, and maybe tell us a little bit as well about because you were dean when Joe Mamlin came back in 2000, and that was really we had the IU Kenya collaboration, which we called it in those days. Nobody had ever heard of the acronym Ampath, but you were there, and you were one of Joe's partners for the start of Ampath. So tell us a little bit about that transition to the dean's role, and maybe the genesis of Ampath from your side.
See, I did not apply for position of dean. The first thing. Second thing is my time. I had overstayed as head of the department because a regulation required that I do 6 years, 3 years and 3 years. That to come 6 years. But I stayed longer because where we were and what was going on at that time. I had also had, a little war. The hospital and the facilities that we had, and I had said some things that were not correct politically. In fact, at some point, we had gone to the head of the senior most officer in service, non-political, administrative in charge of the civil service, to explain exactly what it is that is going on. And there was a whole process that went on. But anyway, as part of that change, the dean of some engage was appointed the director of the hospital. Because now, even government had agreed that this hospital has to move on. So they changed the structure of the hospital. They appointed him to that position. Of course, his time as dean had been done, and I was asked to be dean. And yes, I agreed. I sort of liked it when I was asked, you want to be dean? I said, yes, I'm going to go there, and I'm very clear on what I want to do and what I want to change. It didn't always happen, but that's how I became the dean. Now, one of the things that happened, I think in 1999, that we visited in Guyana, and I met Mamlin again. When I came here, Mamlin was here, but he had gone. And now he was retiring and was coming back here. And he came. We worked together for a bit, but he said something that struck him, that when he was here previous, he didn't see as many cases of HIV as he was seeing then. And something has to be done. And he's a very determined person. So it's something has to be done. And we talked. The first thing he did was to set up clinic. I wasn't sure that was the right thing to do. And I said, you see, you're going to be giving a lot of people false hope. And at the moment, didn't have any drugs at that particular time. But he said, no, we'll treat them for all these infections and the quality of life will improve, which I agreed to go along. Then he also came with a few doses for the HIV drugs when they started. And there was a fixed number of patients he was going to do, which again, I had a bit of problem with it, in the sense that now you are holding this and the people who need it, but you have kept it only for these people. And that was raising conflicts in my head. But anyway, we discussed and we came out clearly on why he was doing that and what would happen, what's likely to happen. But the summary of what he said, you see, one, for us to get support, we have to show that we are able to manage these patients if they are put on treatment. And two, the drugs are going to become available at a cheaper price than they were at that time. So we might as well position ourselves to start it. And I think it is out of that sort of discussion that he started writing the background paper for Ampath. Because I'm engaging myself, we're involved in it, in my part, not so much in the actual writing, but in discussion of what would happen and how it would go and things like that. One of the problems, which actually arose later, I say, when you start this here and seems to work, then everybody is going to come. They're going to come from Mombasa to this clinic. So we must be ready for the influx. And it actually happened in Chulaimbo, when later on, when we divided different sections in Chulaimbo. I stuck on Chulaimbo because it's been one of ours as a medical school from the very beginning. We found out that patients who are supposed to have gone to Kisumu, to the bigger hospital in Kisumu, were all coming to Chulaimbo. They were coming from the other side of the country all the way to Chulaimbo because of the service that he had set up, which was running so well. And patients felt well cared for by this Ampath program. But basically, that was the beginning. I think it was the Ampath program.
Well, it's a remarkable time to remember what was happening. So thank you for that. I was going to ask you one other thing. I know you have a long list of accomplishments as dean, but one of them was beginning the start of MEd programs at Moore University. And so I think a lot of people were hoping the first MEd program would be in surgery because we felt pretty proud of ourselves at that point. And with your leadership, there was a little bit of vacuum created when you went up to the dean level, I think, in our department, but we recovered. But then we were surprised to find the first MEd program you were starting as a cardiac surgeon was actually in family medicine, which was a specialty that did not exist in Kenya at all. And so can you give us just a brief outline of how today you are considered the father of family medicine in Kenya?
I first met family medicine when I was to work in England. They call it general practice. They just started formal training because before then, you finished medical school, you worked with other general practitioners and became a general practitioner. But now they started formal training. At that time, I wasn't impressed, I must say. But after I returned, and one of the things I did earlier on here is that I went to represent this school in the medical practitioner and dentist board, where I became the chair of the education committee, which controlled the entire education in the country. The missionary hospitals, they came up with this concept that they wanted to train a generalist who would work in their hospitals. Initially, they wanted to train this by distance using a university in South Africa, which we didn't buy, I suppose. I mean, today I suppose it would be possible, but at that time we didn't buy. So first of all, the curriculum wasn't correctly written to meet the specification for this country. So we worked on that. But as we were working in that, it was about that time that I became the dean. So everybody else, yeah, now we have arrived to say, can you now host this program? And I said, yes, I'll host the program. And I had become convinced that, like WHO said, in any country, the majority of the doctors should be generalists, yeah, as opposed to specialists for various reasons. So we started working with them, working the curriculum, working to run a program. Then we had a lot of problems, and David will remember we went to one meeting and they say they wanted only born-again Christians in this program. And this was going to be one of the conditions for joining the program. And I said, no, not in a public university. See, there's freedom of worship here, and we cannot make religion as a criterion of entry into programs in a public university. So then we discussed, we looked at all possibilities. Eventually, we worked out a way that they would have in their own hospitals, only people they approved. And we created another hospital, a public hospital, where we would then train everybody else who didn't want to go there or who didn't fit the criteria. There was always a problem, of course, because if I woke up one day and I'm a Muslim and I said I want to go to Tenue, according to the law, they couldn't stop me. And there was going to be a crisis. So we kept our fingers crossed. Kept our fingers crossed. We had very many who then was going to head the program. Yeah, we had a lady here, I don't know if you ever met her, who helped in drafting the original curriculum. The American lady who had worked in Sudan, I think she had left. So we identified Downey, my friend Downey, who's now passed away, to head the program. He was also a missionary, but he was not ultra, he was a liberal, and that's really what we wanted in this program. And we brought him here to head the program. But he headed the academic side, and the political side, I said I would help, and I would do it myself because the doctors were still hostile. I mean, now they are warmed up, but they were still hostile to this program, and I kept pushing. Yeah, until you had the graduates. Now we have a few graduates in the field, and I feel nice when I see them. And when they introduce me to the younger ones, I say, "This is the father of the program."
We later did get an MD program in surgery, but it was much later. So anyway, Prof, you know you've had a remarkable career in so many areas as a clinician and teacher, one of the best teachers, and certainly as a leader. Do you think you share with us maybe some piece of advice that was given to you along the way, or maybe some piece of advice that you give to people you're a mentor for? Just something you would share with people that has guided you or that you could help guide them?
I don't know exactly, but I think about this. I think about this sometimes. And one of the things that I used to talk to newly graduate students, and I'll tell them, I think one of the things that guides me is the code of ethics. Yeah, as put down by our Greek father from before, the Hippocratic Oath. And I normally think about it very many different ways. First of all, it puts you in a society. It talks about a family, along with society. But it talks also about not compromising issues even under threat. Yeah, I think this has guided me a lot. But one of the things, the other things that are important in this is it has to do with the way you grew up and the sort of things you learned as you grew up. For example, you must know clearly what your job is. In this case, you need to understand the statutes and the regulations that govern your job. And in fact, when I was appointed dean, that's advice I was given by one of my teachers from the University of Nairobi. He said, "You've given this job, first thing you do is understand what are you required to do as per this job." Okay. The other thing that I often do or fall to is just listening to people. You don't have to do what they have told you, but just listen to them. Yeah? And be kind to them. See, if I'm driving along the road here and I find one of those people who clean the floor in the building there, I give them a lift. I just listen to them. And sometimes they tell you so many things that you didn't know and you haven't asked. Yeah, but just to make people feel they can come and tell you, if they are objective, what you're doing. Another dimension. So just listen to people so that you put this information together in deciding what direction to go.
Excellent. Thank you, Prof. It's great sharing the thoughts and memories, and we're going to even the next one, and even let's move one. We're going to move just a little bit. One of the things that we want to talk about now is the current situation for Ampath surgery in Kenya. And so I just wanted to point out that Dr. Gary Dunnington, who's also being honored and feted in this fireside chat. I was here for 5 years during the times that you can see, and then there was a 10-year block where there was no surgery team leader on the site. And then you might notice a change in 2013 because what happened? Because Gary Dunnington became the chair of surgery in 2012, and he found Claire Burghardt in almost miraculous providential way. And Claire came, I was followed then by Connie. A lot of you would know. And of course, Joanna Hunter-Squires is here with us, and I'm about to turn this over to her very quickly. So we thank Gary so much for that. That is incredible leadership that he showed. There were great leaders before him, but one of the first things he did when he became chair of surgery at Indiana was visit Eldoret and meet with you and many others. And then he made things happen that showed the importance of this program, things that had not happened. So we want to thank him so much. Next slide. That includes even, we now have global surgery fellows that are coming here, and maybe our internal medicine friends think they're way ahead of us, and they are. But we're pretty proud of where we've come with 9 years of Professor Dunnington's support and leadership. Next slide. Yeah, let's go back one then. And I was going to now briefly turn it over to Joanna Hunter-Squires to give you some more information about some of our current and future programs.
Hello all. In the brief few minutes that remain, I just want to provide an update on some of the exciting things that are going on in Ampath surgery. And I think all of the foundations that we've talked about today have allowed us to begin a lot of new advances in our partnerships as the Department of Surgery and Anesthesia and all of our surgical subspecialties as well. Global surgery fellows who come here and work on Masters of Public Health work, but also help strengthen the collaboration between the two departments in terms of research and education and care. We've also had a lot of new partnerships with people coming from Indiana, from the departments of anesthesia, with a new regional anesthesia program with a visit from Sam Yeep, training our anesthesia registrars, because we now have a Master's of Medicine in Anesthesia in our department as well. And so working with them has been a great start of another program. We continue to have a strong partnership in trauma and burn care. And so you may know about the Advanced Trauma Life Support course that is very common in the United States and not so common outside of the United States, but has had a promulgation in Kenya here through the Surgical Society in partnership with Ampath. And that's continued, and with the support of donors from the United States, and work with the Moy Teaching and Referral Hospital and the partnership here. There's plans to break grounds on a new burn unit for the Moy Teaching and Referral Hospital actually this coming year. So we're very excited about some of those advances. We have a lot of projects coming up in the pipeline as well, with new collaborations with the departments of orthopedic and neurosurgery to help strengthen complex spinal surgery here, and partnerships. We have visitors from cardiac surgery here to meet with Professor Atsula as well about making the dreams he had when he came here many years ago into a reality for those who are training here now and for the patients that are treated here. I think we have other exciting collaborations in research, and in particular in education, where we continue to have a lot of strong collaborations in terms of educational conferences, where residents at Indiana and at Moy both work together and share cases and learn about patient management and about systems management together to be better at taking care of people. And I just want to add my thanks to all three of the of my teachers that are here today, and to thank Dr. Dunnington for allowing me to be here, and Dr. Matthews for making that possible, and then for Professor Atsula for welcoming me here and allowing me to spend time working with him. And so I just want to say a big thank you to all of you.
Joanne, thank you very much. And I hope we haven't lost that. don't know if he had to leave, but we want to talk about here. He's soon to be stepping down from his role as chair of surgery. Tremendous expansion of clinical programs, faculty numbers, research funding, productivity, mentoring of young surgeons and trainees at all levels. I think most people would argue, I would, that his greatest impact has been very similar to Professor Otsula's in his demonstrating his passion for his cultural roots. Gary coming back to Indiana, where he started in medical school, a commitment to taking on large institutional challenges, which I've seen both of them do quite successfully, and leading all of us to a better place that we're in today. And so I do think he's just a tremendous example of advocating for excellence in care, but primarily in his surgical leadership skills. So we today celebrate his tremendous support from the Indiana side for Ampath surgery. And because he's soon to be stepping away from his role as the chair, we thought it was very fitting to give him a gift expressing how much he's meant to Ampath surgery. And so we thought it would be very fitting for Professor Otsula to sort of bestow the gift on him virtually. So I don't know if we're set up for that because Gary's hopefully in his office in Indianapolis. Professor Otsula is in house one. Is there any way we can see that, or is Gary still able to be there? Oh, I see. Okay.
I'm here, David.
Great, Gary. Thank you for not having to run away. I'm sure you had to be somewhere, but thank you. And so I'll turn it over to Professor Otsula.
Gary, we are grateful to you for the support you've given us. When we started this collaboration, Joe Mamlin and David Matthews, 5 years ago, we were very clear that we wanted it to continue beyond our being here, and that it was meant to benefit both sides. And even though it appeared to die at some point, but yes, you did come and revive it, and you have sent us these three wonderful ladies who have supported not only the clinical work, but the training as well. And we have now graduated, for me, as a cardiothoracic surgeon, that Emily has come on board. And that even though I understand you're leaving, but I hope you'll be able to convince whoever comes after you to continue this program. Yes, we'd like to thank you. And I know there's a bunch of...
There may be a gift coming at you soon.
Right here, David. Looks like Ann is holding it up for us. This way.
Thank you, Ann. And
Gary,
how successful can we be with it?
Can I just
thank you?
add, on behalf of the Center for Global Health, I also want to thank you personally for your leadership, your commitment and vision. I hope you feel great pride in the IU faculty, as we do, who have supported the surgery program over the years. And I know that our Kenyan colleagues are grateful for your leadership and support. So again, thank you so much.
Thanks to all of you. My first trip there inspired me tremendously. And I still tell the story of Joe Mamlin looking me in the eye and saying, you need to find a surgeon. And when Joe Mamlin says that, that's what you do. So it has been a challenge, and I still feel great pride and satisfaction with the three outstanding surgeons that we've been able to send over the last few years, and the work they've done, and the work particularly on training surgeons in that locale. So I've really enjoyed it. It's been the highlight, one of the real highlights of my time at Indiana University. So thanks to all of you.
Again, thank you, Dr. Dunnington. Thank you, Professor Otsula, Dr. Matthews, Dr. Hunter Squires. Thank you so much for joining us today. And really thank everybody for staying with us and for the support that you've given us. Your support has really allowed Ampath to grow and create a model for care, serving those in need for more than 30 years now. And if you're interested in learning more about Ampath, please feel free to reach out to us, and we'll be in touch about our next Fireside Chat. Again,